All right, so today you are supposed to have done chord analysis, and then I'm going to go over that with you and talk about non-chord tones in the full version of this. Um, as I started to do this, I realized that this is actually pretty difficult to do numbers, although you can still do chords. And I think that's what I told you to do in class, which is if you're not sure of what a chord is, like we didn't realize at the beginning when we looked at it in class that we're in the key of B minor, and this was actually a 7 chord in B minor, you could still look at that and say, but it is an A sharp, C sharp, E chord, which is an A sharp diminished chord, and that would help you to know what's a note in the chord and what's not a note in the chord. Anyhow, I'm just going to explain to you what's going on with Bach. And here's a second-year concept for you. But this piece starts in the key of D major and ends in the key of D major. And pieces of music that are next level complicated, they go away, they travel, they do things, and then eventually after their hero's journey, they come back home. Okay. Usually go to these places, meaning if I started in D major or B minor, it's a good chance that it'll visit the relative major or minor key, which we found here at the end of this line where we end up in B minor. Okay, you can see I've pivoted here and I said, well, now I'm in B minor, so I can think of this 1 chord as a 3 chord, and then the rest of these chords make sense in the key of B minor. As we look at other places in here that we could go to, these are called closely related keys that are 1 sharp away or 1 flat away. In other words, D has 2 sharps, B minor has 2 sharps, A has 3, same with F sharp minor relative. G has 1 less sharp or 1 more flat, so 1 sharp, and E minor is the relative for that. And composers from this time period, from all the common practice period, basically from Bach through Brahms, love these places. And when they don't go to these places, they're trying to spread their wings and flex and be a little different. But this is normal, okay? And so it's not unlikely that we'll see these places happen here. And so I guess the first thing here for you is just to take a look. You can pause this and see the chord progressions, okay? I think that I'm back in the key of D here, briefly, right? Goes 6, 7, 1, 4, 5, and then this is like a cadential 6/4 kind of chord, going to the 1 right there. This is just part of the 1 chord. And then here on this next phrase, we end up here on a B major chord, okay? When I see that the C sharp has been taken away, and that means I think I'm in the key of G or E minor. And when I see this D sharp here, that's the melodic minor and harmonic minor leading tone that's been added to that. Same thing as we saw the A sharp here. That tells us that we're in B minor because the melodic minor and the harmonic minor raises the 7th note and pulls you into there. And so I can make sense of this by going, well, you know, this is my D chord here. I went G to D. Feels kind of like 1 to 5, almost like, you know, similar kind of thing here. But if I turn this into the key of G, then this is my 5 chord, 1 chord, and this is my 7 chord going to 6. Now, at the end of every line, you're going to end up on a 1 or a 5 chord. So when we look at this B chord here, it's not going to be a 1 chord. There's B major has, you know, way too many sharps in it. And so this is our 5 chord in the key of E minor, which again is a closely related key. So I'm going to have to pivot here from G major into E minor. My 6 chord is going to be a 1, 1, 6, and then a 5. So at the beginning, it feels like we're in G major, but quickly morphs into the relative minor, kind of like this was in the D major and morphed into the relative minor. All right, the next line here. You see, as I add this G sharp, I took away the leading tone for E minor right there, and G sharp, 2 sharps plus a sharp equals 3 sharps. I'm in the key of A. Now, don't worry if you're going like, wow, I get this, but I would have a hard time doing this. That's fine. That's for second year. The thing you should still be able to do is go E, G sharp, B, D this is an E dominant 7 chord. It makes it feel like a 5 chord. And so it is. It's 5 in the key of A, going to a 1, going back to a 5, going to a 4, right? I guess I should put my figured bass there. And then the 1, and then the 5, and then to my 1. And then we know that we end in the key of D. You notice that the G sharp has gone away back to here, and my E chord is not major or dominant anymore, but minor again. We've pivoted back to the key of D, which is how we started the piece. And that makes sense because we like to return there. And so then 5, 1, 2, 1, 6, 5, 5 again, and then 1. So if you struggled with these, I think that's very normal because this is secret tech from next year. But what you should get out of this is that you can still look and say, what is this chord? You know, like right here, this is a D chord, right? This is an E dominant 7 chord. This is a F sharp diminished chord, right? It looks like it's got a 7th on it too, so I guess I should make it half diminished like that, right? Those kind of things. And then from there, you can go and compare this reduction to the notes that are here. So now that we've done that, oops, these are just extra copies. I'm going to go through here and say, well, since we know the chord, what's not a chord tone? Now, we did this part in class. It's pretty dirty. I mean, messed up in terms of, there. So I'm going to go through all these lines again. These 3 lines, these top 2 lines are the same, right? And then these bottom 2 lines are different. And really, the assignment now is, can we find an on-chord tone and explain what it is? In most of the cases we can. There's a couple that are just a little messy, and we'll never account for everything. All right, so basically I'm going to go through here now, and I'm going to say this is the chord. And if I ever do that, you're going to really, well, you go back to your reduction and say, yep, that's what the simplified chord was. And then we can find the non-chord tones. So this is my 1 chord. This is my 4 chord. This is no non-chord tones. And then we talked about here in the past, right? Here is my here's my 4 chord in first inversion. And then we have 3 chord non-chord tones right here that are not part of the chord. When you have stacks of non-chord tones at the same time, 3 like this, and especially if you have what used to be a chord tone as well, they often form other chords. So at its heart, we can look at this and say, enters by step, leaves by step, that's a passing tone, right? Enters by step, leaves by the same note, that's an anticipation. Enters by step, leaves by same note. Well, it's kind of an anticipation, except that this is a not chord tone either, so it didn't really resolve. And this is sort of the weird one that we talked about, like, how do we get that? What do we call it? It's kind of anticipation, but it doesn't actually anticipate any other note. And the reason we have that is because when you stack up a bunch of non-chord tones here, Bach is actually making a new chord to pass between, right? He's combining non-chord tones to make a new chord. This is my 4 chord. This is my 1 chord. Here is an A, C sharp, E, G, 5/7 chord stuck in between. And that's a technique that we'll see happen again and again. So this is hard. It's easy to recognize, hard to execute properly, but put it in your mind that if you're going to stack a bunch of non-chord tones together, you probably want to make a normal chord that would then lead to the next chord. Okay, it's a good idea. All right, here we have a non-chord tone because this is my D, A, and F sharp chord, and the E is entered by same step and then resolved down by step, or sorry, same note step. So this is a suspension right there. Okay, and then here we have another suspension. It's a common trick to play suspension, resolve, suspension, resolve. So suspension, resolve, this new chord here, right here, suspension, resolve. So there's another suspension right there. Okay. In fact, all of these notes right here are non-chord tones because Bach is playing this game where he's going to delay the arrival with multiple non-chord tones. It's going to form a chord here. We're going to our 5 chord right here, and you'll see that this note here, that note there, and that note there combine with the E to make an E, G, B, D, which is a 2/7 chord. 2s love to go to 5, right? And we can look at this. This is going up and then stepping back. So that's a neighbor tone. And this is a jump in and a step out, and that's an appoggiatura, right? Okay. And then let's continue on. I don't see any non-chord tones, no non-chord tones. Here's a non-chord tone. It's a passing tone because it steps up and steps in the same direction again. This one is also a passing tone. And you'll note that these two passing tones together, while they don't make an entirely new chord, do harmonize with each other. They've got the C sharp and the E forming the third, which is like part of a chord. Okay. Here we have a chord. Here we have another non-chord tone entered by step, left by step in the same direction, passing tone. We get to here, it's supposed to be an F sharp major chord, the new 5 chord right here, right? So we see that this A sharp is delayed by a whole beat by this note holding over and then stepping down. So that's a suspension, holds over, steps down, okay? This is a neighbor tone. It steps down and then comes back up in the opposite direction. So that's a neighbor tone. Now, you could have called this a passing tone because it fills the gap, or you can call it a seventh. Sevenths are basically non-chord tones that have been added to the chord enough that they got their own place and name. So it's a seventh of the chord looking like a passing tone. All right, let's get on to the next line. That was a review. Okay, gonna go through this quickly now. Here is a chord note, a non-chord tone that looks like a passing tone. If you did that as a passing tone, that's fine. Or you could recognize it as a 7, B, D, F sharp, and then A. Again, sevenths are non-chord tones that happen so much that we just call them that. Okay. Here is a non-chord tone right there. It steps in, steps out, passing tone right there. No problems. Here's another non-chord tone. It steps down and steps down again. So that's another passing tone. Okay. These are all fine. Looks good. Here is a, looks like passing tones, right? Passing tones. And this is an interesting one right here because it's a passing tone through here, and this is not a chord tone, and then it comes back up. So it's kind of like an anticipation of this, and yet it forms an auxiliary or a neighbor tone down below. So kind of a neighbor tone, but it's one of those gray zones where it didn't come from a non-chord tone. Feels a little bit odd, right? But you know, it's fine. It's a neighbor tone, entered by step, left by step in the same direction. Here we have a bunch of passing tone neighbor tones. Passing tone, neighbor tone, passing tone, passing tone. Looks like we have a suspension right here. The E is the arrival point, should have been right here with this chord right there, but it's held over. So here's another suspension right there, like that. All right, last line. Okay. Looks like we have a passing tone right there. Hopefully these are getting easier for you to spot. This is also a passing tone right there. Okay. These are both passing. Well, one's a neighbor tone, right? And then the one's a passing tone because it steps up again. This one comes back. This here is an anticipation of the next note, like that. Here, we move up into the F sharp and then down again. So it's a neighbor tone, although it's on the beat, right? These guys right here are also not part of the chord. This is a suspension holding down. This one is an appoggiatura, skips down, steps up. And you'll note that he has made another chord for himself, D, F sharp, A, right there before it resolves into this, or B, D, F sharp, A, if you want to think like that, right? No non-chord tones, no non-chord tones. Here's a non-chord tone right there. It's passing tone. There's a passing tone like this. This is held over and then steps down. It's a suspension. And there you go, right? So it was difficult analysis. Hopefully you took a moment and said, well, I can stop and just look and see what the chords are, because that's all we're doing right here. And that will tell us what is part of the chord and what's not part of the chord. And you know, if you struggle with some of that, that's fine. It's really hard music that we're looking at, but get the main concepts, right? And of course, you're working with your orange flashcards. All right, I'm not going to talk about it in this video, but later today, you'll see some more assignments come up in Canvas. They will ask you to take a picture of you with your flashcards and confirm that you have made them and that you're working with them. And then later there'll be some quizzes on this. And there will be an assignment for Friday that will go up as well, which asks you to do some more part rating of 5/7 chords and thinking about that. So, all right.